In today's video, I'm going to be reading 3 recently released or upcoming horror novellas and letting you know what I think about them. The 3 books I'll be reading in this video include Haunt, Sweet Home, Coup de Grâce, and The Night Guest. I finished Haunt, Sweet Home all in one go. I never sat down to give an update about it, so I'm just gonna sit down and have a little in-depth chat about how I felt about this book. I was going into the story definitely expecting it to be a little cozier just based on the look and feel of this book and the description of it. The story is about this reality TV show that is like home improvement during the day and ghost haunting during the night. The main character that you're following is named Mara, and her cousin, I guess, is the face of the show, and he's the main personality who does all of the home renovation stuff during the day, and she ends up getting a job working on the night crew, and her job is to set up hauntings. So basically all of these little special effects and tricks and things to make the people who are in the show think that they are being haunted. It's all a little silly in that way, so I was expecting it to have a lighter feel. And my first impressions of the story were relatively good. I was interested in the concept. I love a story with a reality TV element, and just the concept of it was kind of cute and kind of fun, of like, ooh, haunting the house and like something's gonna happen and I suspect she's going to become haunted. I didn't end up loving where the story went in the second half of the story. I started to notice what it was introducing and felt very underwhelmed. It still had some promise of, okay, I see what they're doing here, maybe this is going to get interesting, but this ended up being more of a quiet story, I guess. It didn't feel like it had a very big ramp or a very big ending. It was just kind of like, and this is what it is. I was hoping that the story would do more with the main character and the haunting that she starts to experience, but I don't know, it just felt a little bit underwhelming to me. I wasn't expecting it to get like super scary by any means, but I just wanted it to have a little bit more excitement or a little bit more to say, and it just felt a little bit lacking in that department. Also, this main character felt so young to me. She is said to be in her 20s, but she feels like a very fresh 19, which is fine if that's what you're going for, but it did feel a little bit off to me that I felt like I was supposed to be following an older character, but they did feel quite young. There's also a lot connected in this story to some stuff that's going on in this main character's family and the stuff that her grandmother does with like carving wood and things. I didn't really feel like that connected to the whole story very well, so I think the setup of this was interesting and good, but what it chose to do with the second half left me wanting a lot more. So I did end up rating this one a 2-star. It was a little bit of a disappointment after being interested in the setup, but I'm almost kind of glad I didn't sit and give you updates throughout because I didn't have a ton of different feelings as I was reading. It is a shorter book. Goodreads says it is 176 pages. I feel like the synopsis also does a good job describing this feeling, like what the story is about in the last line where it says, eerie and empathetic, Haunt Sweet Home is a multifaceted supernatural exploration of finding your own way into adulthood and into yourself. That is kind of what it is, but it also feels like it didn't do a lot with that. I don't know. I feel like I personally didn't get a lot out of this book. I was just looking for a lot more. I've also never read from this author before, and it says that Sarah Pinsker is a multiple Hugo and Nebula award-winning author, so I would be interested maybe to check out more from this author, see what other types of stuff they've written in the past. In general, I feel like I have heard good things about Haunt Sweet Home. I feel like people are enjoying it, but I just didn't feel like it really amounted to much for me to feel satisfied with the story. I am 55% through the second book I'm reading in this vlog, Coup de Grâce, which I did have to look up how to pronounce. The meaning of that French phrase is like the final death blow, the final, strike to kill something before it dies. Kind of makes sense in the context of the story. I was not exactly sure what this was going to be. The synopsis of this one compares it to House of Leaves, and anything that compares itself to House of Leaves immediately has my attention. Not because I necessarily love loved House of Leaves, but it is such a unique experimental book that I'm always interested in those sorts of things that are trying to do something different or be a little different. The other comparison point in the synopsis is to Susanna Clarke, who I think wrote Piranesi. I did start that book, but I just wasn't following, and so I DNF'd it pretty quickly. This book definitely reminds me of Piranesi, but I'm making it through this one easier, probably because it's a shorter book, so it's not as big of a commitment. If I'm feeling confused, it's like easier to push through that. But what the story is about is this guy who is on the subway in Montreal, and the story begins, and oh my goodness, this was such a good first chapter. It was just written so wonderfully. Like, the writing immediately pulled me in. I love the writing style. There were so many things that I was highlighting in my Kindle and quotes that I wanted to go back and look at because the writing is just so good. It pulled me in so quickly. But he's riding the subway, and trigger warning, he is thinking about how he is going to end his life. He is like currently getting ready to go out to the beach and just end it all. On this ride, he ends up getting the attention of another man. They have a little connection. They talk for a little bit. They go hook up, and then they go separate ways. And then your main character, this man, ends up getting off on this little platform area, and it's just very unexpected. He's suddenly in some other kind of situation, and the book is this experimental story where he is stuck in this subway station on this platform. No one else is around. He's in this kind of like liminal space. The synopsis doesn't really give away too much more about what the story is about. It says, determined to find a way out again, he starts to explore the rooms and corridors ahead of him, but no matter how many claustrophobic hallways or vast cathedral-esque rooms he passes through, the exit is nowhere in sight. The more he explores his strange new prison, the more he becomes convinced that he hasn't been trapped there accidentally, and amongst the shadows and concrete, he comes to realize that he almost certainly is not alone. A terrifying psychological nightmare from a powerful new voice in horror. It seems like this is one of those stories that is going to be about like the exploration of your own life and that feeling of hopelessness, and it feels like something that might end on a note of like hope and reconsidering this decision and learning something from this experience, but it's also a horror book, so I'm not totally sure how confident I am in that. How I'm feeling about the story so far, I absolutely loved like the first 25%-ish of the story. I was obsessed. I thought this was gonna be a 5-star. From the 25% to the 55%, I'm starting to get a little bit lost in the story. It is dragging a little bit because it is getting more abstract and strange and kind of reminding me of things like Piranesi. Being only halfway through, it does feel like there's the potential for the story to pull me back into it though. There's still plenty of time to go, plenty of time for me to get back on the story. Maybe he's just going through a difficult time right now, but it is getting a little bit confusing. So I'm hoping that it moves in a direction that makes a little bit more sense. There's also a lot of mythology mentioned throughout this story, and I'm also right now watching that new show Chaos on Netflix, which is all about mythology, mainly the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. I think within like the first chapter, Orpheus and Eurydice were mentioned in this as well. So it's just been funny to be so in this concept of mythology so much. So many of those characters that are in that show are also being mentioned in this just because, you know, they're prominent characters in Greek mythology. So that's kind of cool too. I'm liking it. I'm skeptical. I'm a little bit confused, but I did want to read you some of these quotes because I think this writing is so good. Like, when it's good, it's so good. The first one is kind of in the beginning of the story, and this is the one that actually also mentions Orpheus for a second. We are promised the world, but by the time we hit 30, life knocks us over the head with a baseball bat like we're a fucking piñata at a gender reveal party, and we're struck by the futility of it all. Our finances are indelibly fucked, our dreams are scattered ash, and the future has been salted. Yet despite all that, I sometimes relapse into hope. Just as Orpheus, just as Lot's wife, at times I turn, as a result of sudden mad temptation for the lust of life, of love, of remembering, and look back upon living with fondness and embrace uncertainty. Then a little bit later when he is hooking up with that guy right in the beginning, by reflex of omission, I do not let him touch me. Being naked deranges me. Even like this, near the end, I cannot grant anyone the gentle, unconscious grace of taming my body, of warming it with pleasure. It is a poison, a stigmata I fear enough to spare others the contagion of. And then just a little brief one. Trauma does not always carry big battle wounds. Sometimes it appears in the broad daylight of cold wars fought in silence. So I will say the writing has definitely been my favorite piece so far. I am cautiously optimistic about the second half of this story and where it's going to go. It's a new day, and yet I'm sitting in the same spot, and I'm pretty sure I was wearing a green shirt yesterday too, but this is a different shirt, I promise. I did finish Coup de Grâce last night, and so I'm ready to just tell you my final thoughts, except am I? Because I don't know what my thoughts are on this book. This feels like a book that I don't even want to put a rating on because it was definitely experimental. You never exactly know what you're going to get when you hear a book's experimental. You just know it's not going to make you feel the way a conventional book would. You're not going to hit the plot beats you usually do in the same way that you usually do, and you might not feel satisfied at the end, which is how I felt with this book. It took me on a weird journey. I was confused, and I did not leave feeling satisfied. So all of those things typically are associated with a lower rating for me, but I always just love an author who takes a risk. I love an experimental work. I love something a little bit weird. So I think where I'm going to settle with a rating on it is like a 3-star. Just feels pretty standard. There are things I liked about it. There are things that I did not like about it. There are things that I did not like about it that were probably intentional. Like I felt like I did not know this main character at all. You barely learn any information about them, which could be intentional because it sort of inserts you into the absurdity of the book, but also inserts yourself sort of into it where the person can be malleable and can kind of be anyone. The book also does an interesting thing structurally in the end, which I don't want to fully give away because I think getting to that is kind of fun and surprising and part of the experience in itself. But I will say it did make me wish I had the physical book instead of reading an ebook on the Kindle. It was still achievable, but I personally would have preferred to have the physical book. So if you are someone who finds yourself feeling that way when there is something a little bit different done with a book and you feel like you experience it best in the physical form, maybe try to check this out physically from your library or purchase a copy if you're really into the book, because I did find myself wanting that experience. All in all, I think it was cool. It wasn't so weird to be like a good weird where it really stands out to me. It was just like sort of an interesting thing, exploring some concepts that I find interesting, making me feel strange and unsettled in certain times. What I will remember most about this book is how gorgeous the writing was at times, and I definitely want to see more from this author if this is the writing that they are capable of. And next, I just got the hold for my library for the night guest, so I'm on to reading that one. I just got through The Night Guest all in one go because this one was super short. I actually listened to this one on audiobook and the audio was, I guess, 3-ish hours long, but I was listening at 2x speed, so it was pretty much just an hour and a half and I was completely through the story. This is a story about this woman who is really waking up feeling exhausted. She is finding bruises on herself. She starts to consult a doctor about it and she ends up wearing a pedometer, a step counter, and she finds that she has somehow been walking a lot in the middle of the night. A lot as in like 40,000 steps in the span of a night. Very creepy concept because she's like, what is happening to me when I am asleep? And that is pretty much to set up the story. It's very brief, so I don't want to say anything else about the contents of the story. But I was really liking this in the beginning. It sets up a lot of things that just felt wildly relatable as a woman and a woman with health anxiety. It is unfortunately so common as a woman to not be believed about your pain, your symptoms, your fears. I have personally had many experiences like that, and it gives me doctor's office anxiety, and I don't like going to the doctor, which isn't good for my health, but I don't like going because I have had so many bad experiences, especially with being not believed. So the beginning really hooked me with that aspect because she is actually seeing a really great doctor and she's talking about what a relief that is to feel the empathy from a doctor and like to feel like you've really got a healthcare provider who's really trying to help you through your journey. So that just immediately hooked me in because I was like, yes, I know that feeling. The story just goes so fast. I actually felt myself wishing that there was a little bit more to it. There's some creepiness. The concept of it is creepy in itself. What she discovers throughout the story is creepy. The threads that get layered into the story are creepy, but I just found myself wanting a lot more from it, which is unusual for me because I do typically like a shorter horror story. I feel like I tend to enjoy horror novellas more so than full-length horror novels, but I was like wanting so much more from this. I left it feeling pretty unsatisfied. It was an easy listen and I didn't dislike the story, but I just was like, and I was like looking for a little bit more coming off of it. So as far as a rating for this one, I don't know. With audiobooks, I always feel like I'm a little more generous, and especially because it was so short, it didn't feel like it was overly time consuming. I didn't like get too invested in it to feel such a disappointment. So I kind of feel like it's a 3-star, but more realistically, it's probably like a 2 or 2.5. I really just wish it would have done a little bit more with the story. So I guess that puts a wrap on the video. I feel like I got through these books so quickly because I'm not used to reading a bunch of short things all in a video. But yeah, that was it. That's my thoughts on some soon to be released and recently released horror novellas. If you have read any of these books, let me know down below what you thought about them, or let me know if you plan on picking any of them up. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!